Okay, our last section here is going to be working with our edges. So when we make a selection, the outline of that selection is called an edge. And one of the things that is pretty popular to do in Photoshop is to make something called a feathered edge or a blended edge, where Photoshop creates a blend in the edge of a selection to the background image. So it kind of fades away, essentially. So what we want to do is we're going to go over to Google Classroom. We're going to get down B5. A lovely lady here. We're going to download her and open in Photoshop. And so we have the picture of the lady on the left and kind of just a green background over on the right. You may now notice that your foreground and background colors have changed from whatever you did when we were doing the saving and loading selection. Right above that, you're going to see a little square of black and white. If you click on that, that's going to change it back to the default, which is just black over white. And that's what we kind of want to have happen here. So the next thing we're going to do is grab a selection tool. We are going to use our elliptical marquee, the same one that we used in our first lesson, putting the puzzle together. We're going to click on that. And then I want you to notice that up in the options bar, we have an option for feather. And right now your feather is set at 0. Let's go ahead and in the feather box, let's type in 32. And you can leave the PX. The PX stands for pixels. And then everything else can stay as a default. So we're going to hold our Alt key down. Remember, Alt, when we're using our elliptical marquee, means that we're going to go out from the center. And so holding your Alt key down, we're going to make kind of an oval, which is called a vignette. And I'm just going to kind of go up and out to the sides. Don't go too close to the edge, because remember, we're going to have a feathered edge while we do this. And once you're happy with your selection, you can let go and you'll see your marquee, the black and white dotted line. And then go ahead and grab your move tool and take your picture, or you should say your selection, and move it over onto the green backdrop here. And then hit Control D to deselect. And notice that you can see what we have here called the blended edge or the feathered edge, where instead of it being nice and crisp and clean like we had when we made our other selections, it started to fade into the background. And you can see it here, the fade happening into our white background color over here and fading into the green background once we have it on that side. So that's how you make a feathered edge. It just means that whenever you click on your marquee tool, you can adjust your feather here. If you don't want a feather, remember that you can just turn that back down to 0, and then that will mean that you have a nice crisp edge instead of a feather. So that was all we wanted to show you with this one. Pretty simple, so you can go ahead and close this. You do not need to save. It was just practice. And the last thing that we're going to work on is, again, making a selection, but then working with that edge using something called the Refine Edge dialog box. So we're going to go back to Google Classroom, and we're going to open our last file, which is B6. It is a bald eagle. So open that in the new window, and then go ahead and hit your download button. And open that up in Photoshop. I'm going to do a quick double tap of my hand tool to get it to fit the screen. And then we're going to work with a tool called the Quick Selection tool. The Quick Selection tool is actually found underneath the magic wand. The Quick Selection tool is really handy, obviously, for making quick selections. Pretty easy to see where it gets its name. The thing you have to remember about the Quick Selection tool is that it's actually a brush. So up here on your options bar, you're going to see that there is this drop-down menu here under a little dot with a 30. And this is where we can change the size of our brush head. They suggest that we put our brush head down to 10 pixels. So let's move it down to 10. And the rest of this we can just leave as is. That's okay. And then you're going to see that your mouse looks quite small, and that's okay. The way that the quick selection tool works is it selects pixels based on how similar they are, and you get to decide how similar they are by how much you drag over one pixel or another. So I'm going to start, I should say, at the top of the eagle's head, and I'm going to click and drag, and you're going to see your marquee start to pop up. So you can see as I pull down a little bit, it grabs all of the white of the eagle's head. And as I continue to move down, it takes a little bit. It's kind of thinking because it's a pretty powerful tool. It's like, oh, did you want to grab this? These are similar. So you can see I just moved over the nose and it grabbed all of the nose. Don't be careful that you don't go too close to the edge, because when you go too close to the edge, it starts to get kind of like, oh, do you want me to select the whole thing then? So you're going to notice I'm going to try to pull down here without grabbing any of the background. And so you can see I did that, moving all the way down here. If you get too close, ever remember you can just do a Control D to deselect, and then you can restart. But what I want to show you here is if I zoom in on the outer edges here of the eagle, you can see it didn't really grab the ends of the white here so much, which is what we're going to work with our refine edge box. Okay, so once you have your eagle selected, what we're going to do is go up to our select tab on the menu bar and go down to refine edge. Now this dialog box pops up, and I'm just going to pull it out of the way so you can really see the white edges here of the bird's feathers as we start to work with this a little bit. So up top under the view list, if you drop this down, it's going to say, do you want to see it on a red background, on a black background, on white? You could do it so that it's actually black and white, and it takes away the look of the eagle. It's really up to you. I'm going to leave it on white because we've got these white feathers, and against the white background, it's got nice contrast here for us to be able to see what we're doing. But if you want to look at it in a different way, you can certainly do that as well. So after that, let's go down to the edge detection. And in the edge detection box where it has the radius slider, just kind of play around with that and see what happens as you start to move it. You can see how some of it starts to blur and some of it starts to become more pronounced. We're going to try to put our radius at 30. So if you can't get the slider to be right at 30, just punch 30 in over here in the little text box, and look at how much more pronounced those feathers are than where they were before. We can also experiment a little bit with our smooth slider here, so you can just click on it and drag slowly, and you'll see some of it start to change. We don't want it to be too smooth though, because we don't want it to have kind of a feathered edge. I mean, they're feathers, but we don't want a feathered edge. So we're actually going to put our smooth slider at 3. And then where we move down to our contrast slider, we're going to put our contrast slider at 12. And now if you can remember where we were beforehand versus where we are now, it looks a lot better. So once we have that, you can go ahead and click OK. And you're going to see that the white goes away. It was just for us to make those changes, and see how much more of our feathers are selected now than they were beforehand. So that's what we kind of wanted right there. Now what I want to show you is I'm going to double click my hand tool, and we have our nice eagle all selected. And let's say we wanted to change the background of this image. It kind of looks like it's on wood right now. We want to change the color of this. So what we can actually do is go up to select, and we want to make sure that our eagle is still selected, which it is, and we're going to go clicking on select, we're going to go down and choose the inverse option. When we choose the inverse option, what happens is it selects everything except the eagle. And so now that we have that, we can actually click and choose a different color. I'm going to put it on blue, see what that looks like. So I'm going to click on the blue swatch over on my panels. And then I'm going to do the same thing I did when we were saving and loading selections. I'm going to go to Edit and Fill, and then have the foreground color here, and click OK. And it's going to fill right onto a blue background. If you don't like the blue, you can pick a different color. I think our lesson actually says we should put it on white. So I'll put it on white so you can see kind of what they wanted it to look like here. And of course, because we did the blue just now, it's kind of got a blue outline. So that looks kind of funky, but that's okay. We just, if we would have undid our blue one, which I didn't, but no big deal. So let's say that we want to go back to our blue. I'll just put it back on the blue so it doesn't have that blue tinge on it. And fill with the blue background. And then I can do a Control D to deselect. And there you can see how we have better refined edges over our eagle than we did when we made the first selection. So again, the way you get there is once you have your selection made, you go to Select and then Refine Selection, which is not here now. It's Refine Mask, but you know where it is located underneath there. So that is our last lesson here for Photoshop B. You do not need to save. You can click out of the eagle or B6 and say no. And that is it.